They gave us a clock to watch ourselves die. Admiral Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the Terran Mandate ship, balance her form a still shadow against the swirling star chart on the main view screen. Before them hung the planet Viridia, a swirl of serene blue and white, a jewel held hostage. Encircling it was the Carthan hegemony's blockade, a network of brutalist iron-gray warships whose very presence screamed dominance. They were a punctuation mark of violence waiting for a sentence to end. On the upper right of the screen, stark red numerals bled into the cool blues of the tactical display. The countdown. 71 hours, 54 minutes. Commander Jian Li stated, his voice tight as a coiled spring. The hegemony's ultimatum remains unchanged. Evacuate Viridia and cede the system, or they will begin planetary sanitation. Rostova's gaze didn't flicker from the enemy fleet. Sanitation was a sterile word for mass execution, a Carthan specialty. They broadcast their ultimatums across all public channels, making their cruelty a pillar of their foreign policy. You did not reason with the Carthan hegemony. You obeyed their clock. Architas Rostova said, her voice a low hum that cut through the bridge's quiet tension. What is the latest tally? The 9 Carthan capital ships maintain their interlocking orbital siege pattern. The fleet mind replied, his synthesized voice smooth as chilled mercury. The air around his holographic projector shimmered, the light coalescing into the faint outline of a stoic classical scholar. Their 32 escort frigates are running picket patrols. A direct engagement projects a 97.3% probability of total fleet loss on our part, Admiral. They built a cage and called it peace. Jian Li shifted his weight, the subtle creak of his uniform leather filling the silence. A feint then. A high-speed probe to test their response time. We hit their picket line, forced them to break formation and create an opening for the civilian transports. His hands gestured at the screen, sketching the aggressive maneuver in the air. He was a man of action, his knuckles white where he gripped the console's edge. Rostova finally turned her eyes, meeting his. They are waiting for that, Jian. They want us to bleed on their thorns. Their doctrine is built on predictable responses to overwhelming threats. The faint scent of ozone from the recycling scrubbers was sharp in her nostrils. They expect us to break ourselves upon their wall. A small alert chimed almost apologetically. It was Sub-Commander Anya Sharma from the Electronic Warfare Station. Admiral, the civilian evacuation convoy is holding at Rally Point Gamma, just outside the system's gravwell. 16 transports, 84,000 souls. They're waiting for our signal. The glare of her console reflected in her glasses, hiding her eyes, but not the worry in her voice. They will have it, Rostova said. She looked back at the holographic form of her fleet mind. Architas, you noted a power fluctuation in their sensor grid. Sector Gamma 7 near their flagship, the Iron Judgment. Has it stabilized? Negative, Admiral Architas responded. It remains a subtle, intermittent ghost. Statistically insignificant, likely a resonance echo from the system's primary. Keep a dedicated sensor suite focused on it, Rostova ordered. In a perfectly predictable pattern, the smallest anomaly is a crack in the foundation. We will not be the hammer. We will be the anvil. Down on Viridia, in a small settlement nestled by a sapphire sea, a woman named Alara tried to explain the new stars to her son. The Carthan ships were sharp, angry diamonds in the twilight sky, unblinking and cold. The human relief fleet, which had arrived only a cycle ago, was a smaller, softer constellation, a flicker of hope against the encroaching dark. She held her son's small hand, his warmth, a fragile anchor in a world tilting on its axis. They are here to help us, she whispered, more to herself than to him. They have to be. On the bridge of the balance, Rostova brought up a new schematic. It was not a battle plan of torpedoes and railguns. It was a complex dance of drones, emitters, and energy frequencies. "The Carthons have given us an ultimatum," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound steel. "They expect us to choose between flight and a glorious death. We are going to offer them a third option." Jian Li leaned forward, his eyes tracing the intricate vectors. "A ghost fleet decoys, more than decoys," Rostova corrected. "We will build them a mirror. We will show them a reflection of their own arrogance so bright it blinds them. Anya, I want your EW team to prepare the drone swarms. Architas, I want you to model a complete spectral duplicate of our fleet down to the last heat signature and comms handshake. Their certainty will be their undoing." The fleet mind's holographic head tilted. "Admiral, the energy cost will be substantial. It will leave our primary weapon systems on minimum charge and reduce our shield integrity by 40%. "We are not fighting their ships," Architas, Rostova said calmly. The deck plates beneath her feet vibrated with the low thrum of the Singularity Core, a constant reminder of the power held in careful check. "We are fighting their doctrine. A doctrine that says a big enough threat makes the universe bend. We will teach them that some things do not bend, some things reflect." And the convoy Jian asked, his skepticism warring with a flicker of hope. "The convoy runs the moment the Carthons turn to face their own reflection," Rostova affirmed. "They will create the opening for us." This was the human way. When presented with a binary choice of kneel or die, they looked for the way to stand. They did not just break rules, they rewrote the geometry of the game board. The Carthan clock was still ticking down, but for the first time it felt like it was counting down to a reckoning, not an execution. "Their walls will become our windows." The drone bays of the human flotilla slid open their recessed lighting, casting long geometric shadows across the star-dusted void. Thousands of small hexagonal units no larger than a clenched fist were pushed from their racks by magnetic launchers. They did not ignite drives or flare with heat. They were cold, dead things tumbling silently into the dark, like scattered seeds. This was the first step in building the mirror. Anya Sharma's station was a hive of activity. Her team's fingers flew across holographic interfaces, weaving ghost signatures into the fabric of space. "Phase 1 drone dispersal complete, Admiral," she reported, her voice crisp and professional. "They are drifting into position along the pre-calculated orbital plane. Awaiting your command to activate the lattice." Rostova watched the tactical display. The cloud of drones was an almost invisible haze, a whisper against the backdrop of the cosmos. To the Carthons, it would register as nothing more than a field of micrometeoroids' background noise. "Steady as we go," she said. "Let the pieces settle onto the board." Jian Li paced behind the command dais, a caged predator. "They aren't blind, Ava. Their pickets will sweep that sector eventually. If they spot the drones before we activate, they will see inert hardware Rostova finished for him, and they will wonder what it is for. Their doctrine prizes overwhelming force, not subtle curiosity. They will assume it's a minefield for a retreat they have not yet forced us to make. It is time to hold up the mirror." Architas's projection flickered beside her. "The anomaly in the Carthan CNC network is pulsing in a recognizable pattern, Admiral. It correlates with their flagship's internal command cycle. It appears to be a data bottleneck, a side effect of the extreme broadcast power they use to project their ultimatum signals across the system." "A side effect we can use," Rostova mused. "Anya, can you piggyback on that frequency? When we light up the lattice, I want their flagship sensors to get the brightest, clearest picture possible. I want their commander to see our ghosts in high definition. Consider it done, Admiral Sharma replied, a thin, predatory smile touching her lips. We'll feed them a signal so clean they'll think our ghost ships are spitting distance from their bridge. The waiting was the hardest part. The silence on the bridge was a living thing, broken only by the soft chime of system status updates and the quiet breathing of the crew. Each tick of the Carthan clock, still displayed in mocking red, was a hammer blow against the hull. 68 hours remaining. The civilian transports sat cold and silent at their rally point, 84,000 souls holding their collective breath. Rostova felt the tension, the unspoken question, in every crew member's posture. Would this work? She allowed herself a moment to look at Viridia, a tranquil marble of life. Humanity had fought too hard and traveled too far to let worlds like this be extinguished by dogma. They were not conquerors. They were guardians, gardeners, and when necessary, teachers of hard lessons. We will show them the true meaning of accountability. All drones are in position. Anya reported, her voice cutting through the quiet. The lattice is formed. We are ready to bring them online. Rostova took a breath, the recycled air tasting of metal and anticipation. Commander Lee, signal the convoy. Tell them to begin spooling their drives. Full power but no ignition. On my mark. She turned to Sharma. Anya, light the mirror. Aye, Admiral. Across 1,000 cubic kilometers of space, the dead drones came alive. They did not flare or burn. Instead, one face of each hexagon began to glow with a soft, pearlescent light. They aligned themselves, creating a vast, invisible parabolic dish, its focus aimed squarely at the Carthon blockade. Then the emitters on the human ships, the Balance, the Steadfast, and the True, fired. Not weapons, but focused beams of pure data, of simulated energy signatures, of ghost images. The beams hit the lattice, and they reflected. They think they are looking at a fleet. They are looking at themselves. On the bridge of the Carthon flagship Iron Judgment, High Commander Thoron watched his tactical display with contemptuous satisfaction. The humans were hiding, cowering behind the planet's magnetosphere. It was the predictable response of a lesser species. Then the alert screamed. A new fleet had just appeared on his long-range sensors. A massive one. It was impossible. 3 capital ships, a dozen frigates appearing from nothing on his flank. They were moving fast, a classic hammer and anvil strike vector. Impossible, he roared. Where did they come from? How did they mask their approach? His sensor officer was frantic. Sir, the signatures are perfect. Reading Terran mandate drive coils, shield frequencies, weapons batteries charging. It's their whole fleet and then some. They must have had reinforcements hiding in the system's Ort cloud. Thoron's face, a mask of rigid certainty, twisted in fury. The humans were not cowering. They were attacking. This was an insult to his authority, a direct challenge to the hegemony's power. Their ultimatum was being answered not with surrender, but with defiance. All ships, he bellowed across the fleet channel, reorient to intercept, crush this pathetic assault. Leave nothing but wreckage. Their pride has signed a check their fleet cannot cash. From the bridge of the Balance, Rostova and her crew watched the beautiful, terrible result. The monolithic Carthon fleet, a bastion of immovable force, began to move. Capital ships turned their armored prows, thrusters flaring, as they ponderously shifted their orbits to meet the ghost fleet. The picket lines of frigates abandoned their posts, racing to join the main battle group. A gaping hole had opened in their perfect cage. The board is in motion, Architas stated, his voice devoid of triumph, a simple declaration of fact. Gian Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the awed silence. Signal the convoy. Full burn. Go. Now. The 16 civilian transports ignited their drives. 16 brilliant new stars streaking through the corridor the Carthons had so obligingly cleared for them. They were running for the system's jump gate for safety, for a future. It's working. Lee breathed a rare note of wonder in his voice. He watched the icons of the friendly ships racing away from the trap. Eva, it's actually working. But the Carthons were not fools. A single frigate squadron, the Vultures, had hesitated, their commander apparently more cautious than his superior. They had registered the transport drives flaring to life. Now they were breaking from the main fleet, turning with predatory speed toward the fleeing civilians. They were faster than the transports, their intercept course a red line of death on the tactical plot. The Vultures are not taking the bait. Anya reported, her voice strained. They're moving to intercept the convoy. ETA to weapons range 12 minutes. The ledger must be balanced. Rostova's face was grim. The mirror had worked, but a fragment had broken off. Architas project their trajectory. Can the convoy outrun them, Negative Admiral? The Carthan frigates have a 30% velocity advantage. They will be in range long before the transports reach the jump gate. Jian Li was already turning to her, his expression resolute. We have to help them. Our 2 escort frigates, the Steadfast and the True, they're the only ones with the speed to cover the convoy's retreat. It was the move the Carthons would expect, a piece-for-piece trade. But it was a trade Rostova had to make. The lives on those transports were non-negotiable. Commander Lee dispatched the Steadfast and the True. Mission is to screen, not to engage. Delay the Vultures. Buy the convoy time. No heroics. Understood, Admiral, he said, his fingers flying across his console to relay the orders. 2 of their own ships, their real ships, peeled away from their hiding position. They accelerated hard, becoming brilliant spears of light aimed at the heart of the Vulture squadron. The cost of this gambit was beginning to be tallied. One way or another, blood was about to be spilled. We will pay the price to teach the lesson. The Bridge of the Balance was a study in controlled chaos. The main screen was now split 3 ways. One view showed the lumbering Carthan fleet chasing ghosts. Another showed the civilian convoy, a desperate caravan of light. The third focused on the intercept, the 2 Terran frigates closing with the 6 Carthan Vultures. The comm channel crackled with the clipped professional voices of the frigate captains. Steadfast to balance. We are closing on the Vultures. They've spotted us. They are not deviating from their course. Hold your fire until they commit, Rostova ordered, her knuckles white on the command chair's armrest. The subtle vibration of the ship's inertial dampeners seemed to amplify a low hum of anxiety that resonated in her bones. The Vultures opened fire first. Lances of crimson plasma erupted from their hulls, crossing the distance in seconds. The Steadfast and the True jinked and rolled their point defense lasers, stitching green lines into the darkness to intercept the incoming bolts. Most were vaporized, but not all. A plasma bolt struck the Steadfast high on its dorsal spine. The ship's shields flared a brilliant searing blue, absorbing the worst of the impact. On the main screen, a damage icon appeared. Minor armor scoring. A communications mast sheared away. Another report followed almost instantly. Medical report from the Steadfast Architas announced calmly. 2 crew in engineering with minor plasma burns. Shields are holding at 82%. They are still in the fight. The first debt has been recorded. Jian Li watched his jaw tight. They're outgunned 3-1. They can't hold them for long. They don't have to, Rostova said. Her eyes locked on the tactical display. They just need to be a bigger threat than the unarmed transports. The 2 frigates were a wall of steel and courage. a living shield for the 84,000 souls behind them. They darted and weaved, drawing the vultures' fire, their engines burning hot as they bled momentum to steer between the predators and their prey. The convoy was pulling away. The gap was widening. The frigates had bought them precious minutes. But now the vultures were closing on them, a wolf pack moving in for the kill. Admiral Anya called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "The main Carthan fleet is slowing. Their commander is hailing us. He's realized the ships he was chasing are ghosts." High Commander Thoron's face appeared on screen. It was livid, his features contorted into a mask of pure rage. The transmission was audio only, a torrent of fury. Tricks, cowardly deceptions. You think this changes anything human? You have only delayed the inevitable. Your ships will be dust, and your colony will burn. Rostova met the disembodied voice with unnerving calm. She gestured for the comm officer to open a channel. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute conviction. "We gave you a choice, Commander. You saw a fleet and chose violence. You saw civilians and chose violence. The choice was always yours. You are witnessing the consequence of your own doctrine." "The convoy has reached the jump gate," Archytas announced. The icons of the 16 transports winked out one by one as they plunged into hyperspace. They were safe. A collective sigh of relief went through the bridge. They had done it. Step 1 was complete. Steadfast and true, Rostova ordered disengage, full power to the extraction point. The 2 frigates fired their maneuvering thrusters, turning to flee. But the Carthans were not done. Enraged at the escape, the Vulture Squadron fired a final parting volley. A bolt of plasma larger than the rest caught the True on its port engine nacelle. The ship shuddered violently, its shields collapsing in a shower of sparks. The engine sputtered, died, and began venting superheated plasma into the void. "The True is hit," Lee yelled. "They've lost primary power. They're dead in the water." The vultures were turning, circling back like sharks that had tasted blood. The rest of the Carthan fleet, having realized the deception, was also changing course, lumbering back toward the real fight. The trap had closed not on the Carthans, but on one of their own. Their arrogance demands a reckoning. On the bridge, the momentary elation of the convoy's escape evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. They had won the first move, but the cost was mounting. The timer for Viridia's extermination was still counting down. And now the balance was faced with an impossible choice: abandon the crippled True to its fate, or risk the entire fleet in a rescue that Archytas would undoubtedly calculate as suicidal. Rostova looked at the main screen. She saw the crippled frigate venting its lifeblood into the stars. She saw the approaching wolves, and she saw the colossal form of the Iron Judgment turning its guns toward her. Thoron wanted blood. He wanted to make an example of them. Admiral Archytas said, his synthesized voice a flat line of logic. "The probability of successfully recovering the True before the Carthan fleet arrives is 1.7%. The optimal strategic decision is to withdraw." John Lee stood beside her, his face pale. He said nothing, but his eyes pleaded. They did not leave their people behind. Rostova's gaze was fixed on something else. On the tactical plot, a single Carthan ship was once again behaving illogically. It was the Iron Judgment itself. It was not moving directly toward them. It was moving toward a seemingly empty sector of space far from the current engagement, the same sector it had drifted towards before. "It is not a mistake. It is a method," Archytas Rostova said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You told me the anomaly in their comms network was a bottleneck, a side effect of their ultimatum broadcast." "Correct, Admiral. The power required to ensure the signal is received system-wide on all civilian and military channels is immense. It creates a localized distortion. And that broadcast is still active, Rostova stated. It wasn't a question. The red clock on her screen was proof of that. The ultimatum was a performance, and it was still running. They are still outing their threats to the entire system. A slow, cold understanding began to dawn on Jian Li's face. He looked from Rostova to the tactical display. "You don't just want to save the true," he whispered. "You want to end this." Rostova's eyes were like chips of ice. The moment for restraint had passed. The moment for mercy had been offered and rejected. Now came the lesson. "Anya," she commanded, "bring the mirror lattice to full power. Change the parabolic alignment. I don't want you to reflect our ships anymore." Anya Sharma looked up, her expression a mix of confusion and dawning horror. "Admiral, what is the new target?" "The target is their ultimatum," Rostova said. "The Carthons love to broadcast their power, so we are going to give them the biggest audience they have ever had. We are going to take their voice and turn it into a mirror. The universe is about to hear their true voice." The crew of the Balance stared at their commander. This was no longer about deception. This was about something else entirely. This was about turning an enemy's greatest weapon, their psychological warfare, their doctrine of terror, back on itself. The fleet mind. Archytas remained silent, his holographic form shimmering as he processed the insane calculus of this new command. He was built for logic, for probabilities, and what Admiral Rostova was proposing was a logical nightmare. The energy required would be catastrophic, Archytas finally stated. We would have to channel the output of our primary core directly into the emitter arrays. It would leave us with no shields and only maneuvering thrusters for hours afterward. We would be utterly defenseless. Not defenseless, Archytas Rostova countered, her gaze unwavering. We will be anchored. The true is our anchor. We will not abandon them. She turned to her tactical officer. Jian, plot a course. Take us in straight and steady. Maximum burn. Li's hesitation lasted only a second before resolve hardened his features. Aye, Admiral. The Balance began to move, accelerating not away from the danger, but directly toward it. It was heading for the crippled true, and by extension, toward the converging wrath of the entire Carthon fleet. They were one ship against a navy armed with a plan that sounded like a poet's dying wish. Aboard the Iron Judgment, High Commander Thoron watched the lone human cruiser accelerate toward him. He allowed himself a grim smile. The fool was coming to him. This was the glorious death they had chosen. Target the human flagship, he commanded. On my mark, fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them savor their last moments. We do not seek a glorious death. We deliver a hard truth. Admiral Anya called from the EW station. The lattice is realigned. The drones are in position. We can do it. She still sounded shaken by the sheer audacity of the command. But what do we do with the signal? What's the message? Rostova's eyes narrowed. The message is already there. The Carthons have been broadcasting it for 2 days. We are simply going to amplify it and reflect it. She pointed to a single target on the screen. It was not a ship. It was the location of the anomalous energy signature, the heart of the Carthan command network. Archytas Rostova said that distortion. It's not just a bottleneck, is it? It's a relay. They use their flagship to bounce the ultimatum signal, to give it the power to blanket the system. That is a high-probability hypothesis, Admiral, the AI confirmed. And what happens if a relay station receives a signal that is identical to the one it is sending, but a million times more powerful? Rostova asked the question, hanging in the air like a death sentence. The AI paused for a full 3 seconds. It would create a feedback loop of catastrophic proportions. The relay would overload. The resulting energy discharge would... Archytas trailed off, as if the logical conclusion was too extreme to state. It would turn their voice into a weapon. Jianli finished his voice a hoarse whisper. A weapon aimed at their own fleet. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The balance was now dangerously close. The Carthan vultures were peeling off from the crippled True, turning their attention to the much larger, more immediate threat. The main hegemony fleet was a closing fist, its warships moving into firing positions. They were seconds away from unleashing a volley that would tear the balance apart. On the bridge of the Iron Judgment, Thoron raised his hand to give the fire command. His screen lit up with an incoming transmission. It was from the human flagship. He expected a plea for mercy, a final pathetic protest. He accepted the channel, eager to hear them beg. But it was not Rostova's voice that came through. It was his own. Surrender or face planetary sanitation. This is your final warning. The hegemony's judgment is absolute. The signal was distorted, amplified, layered over itself 1,000 times until it was a screeching, overwhelming roar. It was the sound of his own ultimatum weaponized. "What is this?" he snarled. "Cut their transmission, we can't, sir," the comms officer shrieked. "It's not coming from them, it's coming from everywhere. Their ultimatum has come home." Anya Sharma slammed her hand down on the activation panel. Full power now. The main reactor of the balance shunted its entire output into the emitters. The ship's lights flickered and the deck shuddered violently as an unimaginable amount of energy was hurled into the void. It struck the 1,000-drone mirror lattice and was focused into a single invisible needle-thin beam of pure information. A spear made of Thoron's own voice. The beam struck the relay point on the Iron Judgment. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Carthan flagship began to glow. A sickening purple-white light emanated from its comms spire. The energy feedback loop was instantaneous and absolute. The ship's own broadcast, the very symbol of its power, was now tearing it apart from the inside. The comms spire exploded in a silent, blinding flash. A wave of raw energy, shaped and amplified by Carthan technology, erupted outwards. It was not a plasma blast or a torpedo. It was a wave of pure signal, of overloaded data, of raw, screaming energy. It was the sound of an ultimatum becoming a physical thing. The wave washed over the nearest Carthan ships. Their lights flickered and died. Their engines sputtered. Their command and control systems, all networked to the flagship's now obliterated relay, fried instantly. One by one, the ships of the hegemony fleet went dark and silent. They were not destroyed, but they were crippled, deaf, dumb, and blind. Their greatest weapon was their own voice. The bridge of the balance was silent, the crew staring in stunned disbelief at the view screen. The entire Carthan fleet, save for a few ships on the periphery, was dead in the water. The Iron Judgment, its spine broken and its systems fried, was now just a tomb of cold metal. The red countdown clock on their screen had vanished, its source signal finally silenced. The cost had been immense. The balance was adrift, its power core slowly, painstakingly rebooting. Its shields were gone. It was a sitting duck. But it had worked. Archytas Rostova said, her voice raspy from the tension. "Status of the Carthan fleet. 75% of their ships are showing catastrophic system failure consistent with a massive electromagnetic pulse, the AI reported. They are disabled. The remaining 25% are in disarray, their command structure decapitated. They are no longer a coherent threat. Jian Li sank into his chair, running a hand over his face. My God, Eva, you didn't just break their fleet. You broke their doctrine. Rostova's eyes were on the crippled frigate, the True. A tractor beam powered by the last of their auxiliary energy was already reaching out for it. We keep our promises, Jian. We bring our people home. This was the pivot. The moment the lesson was truly delivered. Not in the violence of the act, but in its precision. They had not slaughtered the Carthons. They had forced them to listen to themselves. They had held up a mirror, and the reflection had shattered them. They came to deliver a sentence. Instead, they read their own. Down on Viridia, the angry stars in the sky began to dim. One by one, the sharp, menacing lights of the Carthan blockade went out, leaving only the soft, steady glow of the human ships. No one on the planet knew what had happened, only that the oppressive weight that had been crushing them for 2 days had suddenly, inexplicably lifted. Alara stood outside with her son, looking up at the now quiet sky. The silence was more powerful than any explosion. She pulled her son close, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. It was a tear not of sorrow, but of a desperate, fragile hope finally allowed to breathe. On the bridge of the Balance, as the engineering crews worked frantically to restore power, a new priority message flashed on Rostova's command console. It was from Mandate High Command. They had been monitoring the situation from a distance, respecting her operational authority. The message was short and to the point. Admiral, the Carthan hegemony has gone silent. Their public ultimatum broadcasts across 3 sectors have ceased. We are detecting widespread network failures in their fleets. Explain. Rostova looked at the disabled Armada before her. She looked at the rescued crew of the True being ferried across from their wounded ship. She looked at the serene face of Viridia, a world that would now remain free. She began to compose her reply not as a warrior reporting a victory, but as a teacher submitting a grade. The Carthons had been tested on their own terms, and they had failed. The first part of the lesson was over. Now came the final exam. We have opened the ledger. Now it is time for the reckoning. The message to High Command was sent, a dry, factual accounting of an impossible event. On the bridge of the Balance, the silence that followed was heavier than the vacuum outside. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind the stark reality of their position. They were a single, underpowered cruiser guarding a field of dead warships and a crippled frigate deep in hostile territory. The victory felt fragile, a soap bubble waiting for the slightest touch to pop. Jian Li was the first to move his boots, echoing on the deck plates, as he walked to the tactical station. The remaining Carthan ships are not responding to hails. They're holding their position just outside the main debris field. 21 frigates and 4 cruisers. They're leaderless but not harmless. They are listening. Rostova said, her voice quiet but firm. She watched as a medical shuttle, a tiny spark of light, moved from the Balance to the wounded hull of the True. The rescue was underway. They are in shock. Their entire reality, the doctrine that told them they were invincible, has just been shattered. Right now, they are more dangerous than ever. Architas's holographic form solidified beside her, the light from his projection casting a cool blue glow on her face. Admiral, my analysis concurs. The command vacuum will lead to fracturing. Multiple subordinate officers will be vying for control. The most aggressive will likely win, and their first act will be to avenge their high commander. The silence is not peace. It is a held breath. Anya Sharma swiveled in her chair, her face pale in the light of her console. Power core is at 32% and climbing. Shields are still offline. Main drive is available, but any high-energy maneuver will delay the shield reboot sequence by hours. The scent of burnt ozone from her overloaded board still lingered in the air, a phantom of their desperate gamble. Then we do not maneuver, Rostova stated simply. We are the anchor of this situation now. We will hold our ground. A medical update scrolled across the main screen, a simple text report from the True. All hands accounted for. 17 injured, 3 critical but stable. The ship is a loss, but the crew is alive. Jian read it aloud, his voice thick with relief. The ledger had its entry of cost, but it was not written in lives lost. Rostova nodded, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. Get them settled in the main medical bay. Give them priority access to the Sin Weavers. She then turned her gaze back to the silent, menacing shapes of the remaining Carthon vessels. The first part of the lesson had been delivered with blinding light and deafening silence. The second would be delivered with a choice. Their doctrine failed. Ours must now succeed. Architas. She began draft a message. Broadcast it on all channels system-wide. Use their own ultimatum frequency. What are the terms, Admiral? The fleet mind asked. The terms are simple, Rostova said, walking toward the main view screen until her reflection was a ghostly overlay on the starfield. To the remaining commanders of the Carthon hegemony fleet, your command structure is broken. Your ultimatum is void. Your position is untenable. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. You have 2 paths. Path 1. Power down your weapons and drive systems. Prepare for our prize crews to come aboard. Your crews will be given sustenance and medical aid. You will be treated humanely and repatriated under the Articles of the Galactic Concord. Your ships will be seized as reparations for the crime of planetary coercion. Jian Li's head snapped up. Ava, they will see that as an insult. They will fight to the last man before they surrender their ships. That is their choice, Rostova said, her voice unyielding. Which brings them to path 2. She continued dictating. Refuse these terms, and we will consider you an active threat to galactic peace. We will use the means at our disposal to neutralize your vessels. The choice is yours. A safe journey home on a transport or a permanent place in this system's graveyard. You have 1 hour to decide. Their clock is broken. We are giving them a new one. The message went out, a calm, rational statement in the wake of chaos. It was the inverse of the Carthon ultimatum. It did not threaten civilians. It did not promise annihilation. It offered a choice between a ledger of assets and a ledger of lives. It was a mirror not of energy, but of morality. In the med bay, a young ensign from the True, his arm encased in a glowing blue medical field, watched the broadcast on a wall monitor. He had been sure he was going to die. Now he was listening to his admiral offer the enemy a way out that didn't involve a single death. He saw the faces of his fellow survivors around him, exhausted, wounded, but watching with a fierce, burning pride. This was what they fought for. A Carthon cruiser, the Unyielding Will, was the first to respond. Its running lights flashed a sequence of defiance. Its weapon ports dark until now began to glow with the telltale crimson of charging plasma coils. A new voice, harsh and guttural, crackled over the open channel. This is Sub-Commander Varish of the Unyielding Will. I now command this fleet. We do not surrender to decadent, weak-willed tricksters. We do not need a flagship to crush you. We will die with honor before we accept your terms. 3 other cruisers and a dozen frigates followed his lead, their weapon systems coming online. They began to move a smaller but still lethal fist of iron, leaving the other more hesitant ships behind. They were forming an attack wing. The hardliners had found their voice. They choose the path of ruin. We must walk it with them. So much for a peaceful resolution, Gian muttered, his hands already flying across his console, plotting firing solutions they couldn't possibly execute. They're coming for us, Eva. And they're not going to stop. I know, Rostova said. Her calm was unnerving. They still don't understand the lesson. She looked at the field of disabled Carthan ships floating between her and the new threat. They were a problem, a field of wreckage, a graveyard, and a shield. Architas, she ordered, her voice ringing with a sudden sharp clarity. I need every tractor beam emitter we have, including the auxiliary cargo projectors. Target the 3 largest disabled ships in the debris field. The Carthan battlecruisers. The fleet mind processed the command. Admiral, our power core is still not at full capacity. Using the tractor beams on objects of that mass will drain all available energy from the rebooting shield grid. It will leave us completely exposed. We are already exposed, Rostova shot back. But we are not defenseless. We have a field of anvils. Commander Lee, I want you to give Sub-Commander Varish a hammer. Gian looked at her, utterly bewildered. A hammer? What are you talking about? Give him what he wants. Rostova clarified. Plot a course for the balance that takes us directly through the densest part of the debris field. Make it look like we're trying to use the disabled ships as cover. A panicked, predictable retreat. It is time to teach them about the true weight of their actions. Understanding dawned on Lee's face, followed by a slow, grim smile. A trap, not a kill box. A physics problem. Precisely, Rostova confirmed. Varish is arrogant. He thinks we are crippled and running. He will pursue, and when he does, he will find that the ghosts in this machine are very, very real. The balance moved. Its engines fired with a low, rumbling groan, pushing the cruiser forward, not with the confident surge of a warship, but with the lumbering gait of a wounded beast. It slid behind the colossal, silent hulk of a disabled Carthon dreadnought, a metal mountain adrift in space. On the other side, Varish's attack wing accelerated, eager to close the distance and deliver the killing blow. He's taking the bait, Anya reported, her voice tight with anticipation. He's following us in. He's ordering his frigates to flank, to box us in against the debris. Stay on course. Rostova ordered, her eyes glued to the tactical plot. The ship shuddered as its inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the proximity of so much mass. Architas. On my mark. Varish's voice boomed over the comms, again dripping with contempt. Nowhere left to run, human. Your cleverness has reached its end. Now face the judgment of the hegemony. His ships opened fire. Lances of plasma slammed into the dead hulk of the dreadnought, illuminating it in a silent, spectacular display of wasted energy. The explosions were soundless, but the impacts sent shudders through the metal carcass, causing pieces of shattered armor to shear off and tumble into the void. Mark, Rostova said, her voice cutting through the tension like a diamond. The ledger is heavy. 3 thick sapphire blue beams of energy lanced out from the balance. They were not weapons. They were tractor beams. They locked onto the nearest disabled Carthon battlecruiser, a ship weighing millions of tons. The balance's own engines flared, not to push itself forward, but to act as a pivot. The laws of physics did the rest. The massive dead ship caught in the grip of the beams, and the cruiser's momentum began to move. It was agonizingly slow at first, a giant stirring from a long sleep. Then it gained momentum, a silent avalanche of steel. It swung around a colossal shield of the hegemony's own making directly into the path of Varish's flanking frigates. The Carthon frigate pilots had only seconds to react. They had been expecting a fight, not a celestial collision. Two of them managed to veer away their engines, screaming in protest. A third was not so lucky. It struck the battlecruiser's armored prow with a sickening, silent flash of light. The frigate simply ceased to exist, its energy core detonating in a brilliant, expanding sphere of plasma. Varish screamed in fury over the comms, a string of curses. He had lost a ship without the humans firing a single shot. It worked, Jian breathed. We're using their own fleet as a weapon. Not a weapon, Rostova corrected, her eyes never leaving the display. A consequence. Anya, I need you to find me another one. We are not the storm. We are the eye of the hurricane. The dance became a brutal, elegant piece of orbital mechanics. The balance was the choreographer weaving through the graveyard it had created. Varish's fleet was the enraged but clumsy partner. Rostova didn't fire a shot. She moved, she pushed, she pulled. She used the immense mass of the disabled fleet to dictate the terms of the engagement. She used a second disabled ship to screen a plasma volley from the unyielding will, its hull absorbing the impacts meant for them. The heat from the explosions caused the dead ship's frozen coolant lines to rupture, spewing a thick cloud of ice crystals into space, a perfect smokescreen. They slipped through it unseen. Then came the second cost. A Carthon frigate, anticipating their move, fired a spread of torpedoes through the cloud. With their shields still offline, the Balance's point defense lasers were the only protection. They stitched the darkness with emerald light, destroying most of the incoming warheads. One got through. It struck the aft engineering section. The explosion was a jarring, violent tremor that threw half the bridge crew from their feet. Red lights flashed across every console. The deck tilted sickeningly before the emergency gravity stabilizers kicked in. Damage report. Lee yelled, pulling himself back to his station. Aft hull breach. Decks 21 through 23 are sealed and venting to space. Archytas reported, his voice calm despite the chaos. Main engineering is compromised. We are losing drive plasma. Our velocity is dropping. Their hate has a price and we are paying it. They were slowing, becoming an easier target. Varish saw it instantly. He pushed his own ship forward, determined to end this. The unyielding will came charging through the debris, its main guns glowing ready for the final killing shot. He's on a direct intercept course, Anya warned. He'll be in optimal firing range in 90 seconds. We're not going to have shields or main drive back in time, Jian said, his voice grim. This was it. The gambit had failed. Rostova's gaze was fixed on the tactical plot, her mind racing. There was one last move on the board. One final, desperate piece of geometry. It was reckless. It was insane. It was all they had left. Archytas, she said, her voice low and intense. Target the disabled dreadnought. The big one we used as a shield. I need 2 tractor beams on its bow, 1 on its stern. Prepare to execute a full rotational thrust. The fleet mind processed the command, and for the first time a note of something akin to alarm entered its synthesized voice. Admiral, the power draw will black out the entire ship, including life support, for at least 10 seconds. Furthermore, the resulting rotational force, it will not just move the dreadnought, it will spin it. I know, Rostova replied. Jian, get ready to vent the remaining drive plasma from our damaged engine. All of it, on my mark. This is the final entry in the account. Varish was closing his ship, a steel behemoth hungry for the kill. He was 100 kilometers out. 50. 20. His gun ports glowed brighter. Now Archytas, Rostova commanded. The tractor beams locked on. The ship's lights died, plunging the bridge into absolute darkness, illuminated only by the red glow of the Carthon's weapons. A deep groaning vibration ran through the hull, as every last drop of power was poured into the projectors. The colossal dreadnought, a ship the size of a city block, began to turn ponderously at first, then with gathering speed like a discus in the hand of a giant. Now Jian slammed his hand on the console. From the ruptured engine of the balance, a plume of incandescent blue plasma erupted, not as thrust, but as a focused jet. It was the last of their momentum, their last breath given away. The jet struck the spinning dreadnought, adding a final critical push to its rotation. Sub-Commander Varish, his face a mask of triumph on his own bridge, saw the human ship go dark. He saw the great dreadnought begin to spin. He did not understand. He was too close, his victory too certain. The spinning dreadnought's broken superstructure, a jagged mess of torn armor plates and support beams, swung around. It was no longer a shield. It was a scythe. A multi-million-ton blade of jagged steel sweeping through space at a terrifying velocity. It hit the unyielding will amidships. There was no explosion. The kinetic force was too immense, too absolute. The Carthan cruiser, a vessel of war and pride, was simply and silently obliterated. It shattered into a million pieces of glittering dust, its energy core extinguished before it could even detonate. Their iron will has met an unbreakable truth. The bridge lights of the balance flickered back on. Life support hummed back to life. The crew picked themselves up, staring in stunned silence at the screen. Where the lead enemy ship had been, there was now only a rapidly expanding cloud of debris. The remaining Carthan ships stopped. Their attack faltered, then completely dissolved. They had just watched their leader, a zealot of the highest order, be annihilated without the enemy firing a single weapon. He had been crushed by the corpse of his own fleet. The lesson finally was complete. One by one, the lights on the remaining Carthan ships began to dim. They powered down their weapons. They shut off their drives. They were surrendering. The aftermath was a quiet, methodical affair. Mandate support vessels arrived within the day, a fleet of engineers and medics, not soldiers. They began the long process of securing the surrendered Carthan fleet, their hulls now bearing the temporary stenciled mark of the Terran Mandate. Carthan crew, disarmed and grim-faced, were transferred to transport ships. They were not put in collars or chains. They were led to medical bays and mess halls, their expressions a mixture of confusion, humiliation, and a dawning, grudging respect. On the bridge of the now repaired balance, Rostova stood with Jian watching the immense operation unfold. Viridia was safe. The hegemony's fleet was captured. The doctrine of ultimatums had been broken over the knee of cold, hard physics and an even harder moral line. A formal declaration scrolled across the public galactic channels broadcast from Mandate High Command. By the authority of the Galactic Concord, the Carthan hegemony's ultimatum doctrine is declared a crime against galactic peace. All assets used in its enforcement are hereby forfeit to the public ledger for reparations. This precedent is now locked. The lights of the captured Carthan fleet, a constellation of iron and arrogance, were systematically switched from hostile red to the calm, neutral blue of mandate control. On a public newsfeed, a running tally confirmed the numbers: 41 hegemony vessels seized, over 50,000 enemy crew members taken into humane custody, 84,000 civilian lives saved. In the void, the 1,000 drones of the mirror lattice, their task complete, vented their residual heat and cooled to a dull, unassuming pewter gray before beginning their retraction sequence. Rostova looked out at the silent Armada, a monument to a failed philosophy. Power was not the threat you could make, but the choices you could inspire. The Carthans believed their voice was a weapon, a hammer to shatter the will of their enemies. We simply showed them it was a mirror and let them see their own reflection. When that reflection broke them, we did not offer a collar or a cage. We offered a hand and an open ledger. That is the final entry in this account. Some things do not bend, they balance.